Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another Sacred Mountain Battle Report Hobby Time update. This Hobby Time is about classic Battletech, and not the classic Battletech that some of you may be familiar with. This is Battletech dating back to its inception. Some might say the Crescent Hawk's inception. Really though, this is about my friend. He was a childhood buddy, and we grew up together in a very rural area of Arkansas. And he and I would spend time together and play BattleTech and various other board games like Axis and Allies. But one of the first war games that he and I ever got involved in was classic BattleTech made by FOSSA. This is the game that came out just after Battle Droids, so I guess it's maybe second edition. And our game came with cardboard stand-ups. We didn't have any miniatures at that time, although I believe Raul Partha made metal miniatures for it, and I think one of us had some Warhammers or an old Marauder, maybe an Archer. But when this first came out, there were it was just a standalone box. Everything that you needed to play was in one box. And then as the universe really expanded to what we know today. But at that time, it was just Battletech, a game of armored combat. And they had expanded into a role-playing game called Mech Warrior, as well as having a magazine that was coming out. I think it was once every quarter, called Battle Technology. And then various supplements like Aerotech and CityTech, Battle Force. And we would see in these Battle Technology magazines the nascent fetal form of what I suspect came to be Alpha Strike. Well, in I think the late 1990s, there was a lawsuit with Battletech and not Harmony Gold. I believe that it was TCI. FOSSA had licensed some original mech designs from TCI, which was a 20th Century Importers company that imported Bandai models and miniatures and other things from Japan, like things from the Robotech universe. And the original owners of FOSSA thought that they were licensing appropriately the IP and the art so they could put these battle droids into their own universe and use them for their own purposes. Well, come to find out, they weren't able to do that. And through a series of uh, litigations, or I guess it was actually settled out of court, that FOSSA agreed to ultimately stop the production of these images and stop using them in the Battletech universe. Now, these were eventually retconned out of the Battletech universe with subsequent settlements and lawsuits through various owners, including Topps, Microsoft, and now Catalyst Game Labs. And these old designs are now referred to in the community as unseen Battletech mechs or battle mechs. And the art from the 80s, it wasn't fantastic, but it was, all hand drawn. It wasn't computer generated. And man, it was just, there was something about it that just really lit my and my friend's imagination. And throughout the 1980s, we collected various houses like House Davian or the Periphery books or the Battletech tactical readouts. But there was one illustration in particular in the original rulebook talking about battle mech construction. Or it was the first illustration on battle mech construction. It was this archer that was in a state of disrepair and had techs all around it trying to refit it for the next battle. And this has been mine and my friend's favorite illustration from these days of now unseen battle mechs. And I'd already always known that this was one of his favorite illustrations, and so I started building a diorama based on this illustration that I would eventually give him. And I wanted to add some life and vibrancy to it. So uh, I did end up lighting it with an LED using an Arduino. And the hardest part really was getting those welding flashes to flash randomly. That's why I ended up having to use an Arduino rather than just lighting it with normal LEDs. But of course, that scissor lift wasn't a model, and nor was the little tracked vehicle down at the base of the archer's left leg, or the hex crate, or the computer readout, or the text for that matter. And so I had to design those in Blender, and I'm pretty much a Blender noob, but I really wanted this. I really wanted to make this diorama, and so I learned a little bit and found suitable proxies for the techs online, paying for a few, but most of them were free, and then had to scale them for this particular Bandai 1/72nd Spartan model. But onto the diorama. So, like I said, started, I guess I really started with Blender, comparing this scissor lift because I thought this was going to be the worst and hardest part of the whole build. And I guess maybe it was. Maybe it was the hardest part. It took a while, but I got a rough shape after about a week or so of work, and then went back to it once the Archer was built and was able to scale it. The Archer itself had, or I should say, the Spartan had to be assembled in pieces, and it took a while to kind of figure out how I wanted to put it together, how I was going to light this thing, and how I was going to snake the wires. And what I really wanted to do was to design an electrical circuit that would blink LEDs randomly. But it turned out that it was just far too complex of math for me to kind of, because I'm so alienated from my circuit design days, I guess 30 years ago, that I there was too big of a learning curve to get there. So I went with an Arduino, and then that seemed to make it quite a bit easier. In addition to the that scissor lift that I was designing and prototyping, I also I had to get the diorama fairly accurate. I had to cut the missile launch base off the Archer or Spartan, and then design some missiles. The initial ones, and in the drawing, the missiles are silos, or just kind of open cylindrical areas. But my Blender skills were so poor, I didn't. It was very difficult for me to get those cut into the shape, or these little, they're basically cubes, uh, and have them be perfectly spaced. But it was much easier to draw a hemisphere and then just drag that hemisphere into the cube, where it would be partially occluded by the cube itself. And you could see that I initially tried to just use a drill and make the missiles missile bays, but that didn't work out. So I just had to do it in Blender, unfortunately, for my buddy. And then I had to saw off all these panels where the archer's myomers were exposed. And then I just used some beading supplies from my wife's hobby that she never really got into, but now we have beads everywhere that I was able to use. I oftentimes use plasticard from a sign, especially those for sale signs you can get from Walmart. So if you ever use those and then you don't discard those because it's pretty good plastic card to use. And I made the wooden box for it, and after I had made the base for it and kind of the concrete slabs, it basically sat on my desk for mm, several months until finally I kind of got a wild hair and I said, okay, I got to get this thing done. I got to get back on my Arduino and break out the airbrush and put this project to bed. So over the next month or so, I started airbrushing, assembling, and really the hardest part was just trying to figure out how I was going to wire this thing to get it to work. And then once I had it in the box and I had painted the box black, I realized, my God, this thing is super dark. And I had to figure out somehow to light it or give it some overhead lighting. So I used these filament LEDs, which are super brittle. They are like easily able to destroy. So I end up having to hot glue those to a popsicle stick and then solder everything. I finally had to wait on a switch and battery pack to come from Amazon, and then packed it in my suitcase with my orcs and went to the LVO to meet my buddy Aaron. And by the way, don't fly Spirit. My God, there's no room for you to turn around, or you can't fart in those seats. You know, it's so tight. It's like the dog whistle fart because it's so tight in there. Anyway, uh, hope you enjoyed the build. It was actually quite a bit of fun to do, and if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put those in below. I did enter it in the Diorama contest at the LVO, and I guess the batteries ran out, and so I basically just got a participation award and a pat on the head, and they're like, you need to brighten this up on the inside. And I tried to tell them that the batteries were dead, but you know, it was a contest, so no big deal. Hope you enjoyed that, and enjoy this last assembly in peace. Anyway, that about wraps it up. I just wanted to say thanks for tuning in to another Sacred Mountain Battle Report, and to my very good friend Aaron, thank you so much for being my friend for all these years, and I really enjoy going to the Las Vegas Open with you, and I hope you enjoy the diorama and it sits on your desk for many years without a cat knocking it over.